The High Chaparral told the story of a family fighting to survive the Arizona desert. But behind that courage were real-life tragedies no one ever saw: illness, accidents, heartbreak, and broken marriages. Some left Hollywood without a word. Join us as we uncover their true stories and pay tribute to the lives they left behind. Cameron Mitchell as Buck Cannon. Cameron Mitchell was born on November 4, 1918, in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. At 49 years old, Cameron Mitchell played Buck Cannon, the reckless yet fiercely loyal brother, in The High Chaparral in 1967. His performance carried a raw edge shaped by wounds far older than his Hollywood career. And the boy he once was never truly left the man he became. Growing up in a poor pastor's household, Mitchell wore his sister's discarded coats and shoes, quietly absorbing the shame that hardened into lifelong insecurity. The emotional hunger of those years pushed him into early-stage work such as Cass Timberlane and Homecoming, roles that allowed him to mask childhood fragility behind adult bravado. But the same thin winters that shaped his discipline also triggered the respiratory weaknesses that shadowed him for decades. He battled recurring chest infections and exhaustion while training for Broadway, pushing his strained lungs through death of a salesman. The pressure to outperform his own body created a quiet dread. That dread became a companion as constant as any co-star, and eventually, it caught up with him. Mitchell died on July 6, 1994, at 75 years old from lung cancer, the final and cruel echo of the vulnerabilities he had carried since childhood. He was buried at Desert Memorial Park, leaving behind an estimated net worth of $10 million built not from ease, but from relentless work meant to outrun the boy in borrowed shoes. Leif Erickson as Big John Cannon. Leif Erickson was born William Wycliffe Anderson on October 27, 1911, in Alameda, California. At 56 years old, he played Big John Cannon, the unshakable patriarch, in The High Chaparral in 1967. His commanding presence hid a lifetime shaped by fear, discipline, and a quiet battle against a fragile body. And nothing in adulthood fully erased where it all began. As a boy under the stern rule of a ship captain father, Erickson learned early that tenderness was rare and expectations were high. His early stage and band work, including appearances in Tea and Sympathy and Conquest, became escapes from a home where silence was safer than expression. But childhood fevers, ear infections, and long bouts of fatigue weakened him, forcing him to build emotional armor long before he built a career. In his early professional years, he pushed through lingering pain and partial hearing loss, conditions worsened by overwork in his 1930s Paramount days. Even as he moved into films like The Snake Pit and On the Waterfront, the strain of maintaining a strong exterior over a weak foundation created a quiet desperation. His body kept score, even when the audience could not. Erickson died of cancer on January 29, 1986, at 74 years old in Pensacola, Florida, after keeping his illness secret until the final months. Buried with little fanfare, he left behind a net worth of about $5 million and the image of a man who carried his childhood battles into every role. Henry Darrow as Manolito Montoya. Henry Darrow was born Enrique Tomas Delgado on September 15, 1933, in New York City. At 34 years old, Henry Darrow played Manolito Montoya, the charming, unpredictable Montoya heir, in The High Chaparral in 1967. His performance became a landmark moment for Latino visibility on American television. But the roots of that charisma began in a childhood filled with dislocation and quiet struggle. Darrow carried the confusion of being born in New York to Puerto Rican parents who were themselves searching for belonging. That uncertainty deepened when he moved back to Puerto Rico at 13, suddenly a stranger in the very culture he was told was his own. Early-stage roles such as The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit exposed how much he relied on humor to mask insecurity, but they also forced him to confront his accent, his identity, and those wounds shaped the performer he would become. Darrow suffered recurring throat inflammation that risked ending his acting dreams long before they began. The strain of projecting his voice on stage worsened his condition, especially during his training at Pasadena Playhouse, where exhaustion often left him shaking. Even early television work triggered allergies and migraines under harsh studio lights, reminding him how fragile his body was compared to the bold. Finally, Darrow died of natural causes on March 14, 2021, at 87 years old. His peaceful passing contrasted with the lifelong turmoil of a man who broke barriers, yet carried the ache of displacement through every decade. With an estimated net worth of $4 million, he left behind not riches, but a legacy of representation carved from the pain of a young boy who never stopped fighting for a place to stand. Linda Cristal as Victoria Cannon. Linda Cristal was born Marta Victoria Moya Burgess on February 25, 1934, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. At 33 years old, Linda Cristal played Victoria Cannon, the elegant, resilient matriarch of the Cannon family, in The High Chaparral in 1967. Her portrayal redefined Latina representation on American television. But the strength she brought to the role was born from a childhood marked by instability and silent fear. As a young girl in a politically tense Argentina, Cristal lived with the constant threat of displacement. Her family fled to Uruguay after her father faced political pressure that fractured her sense of safety and belonging. Early film roles in Argentina and Mexico, such as Comanche and Cry Tough, forced her to grow up quickly, masking the insecurity of a girl who had lived her life in motion. She soon was shadowed by chronic anxiety and digestive illness, conditions worsened by the pressure to perform as a young actress in foreign-language productions. The Conservatorio Franklin demanded discipline that strained her already fragile health, and long studio hours left her faint and trembling. Even in Hollywood, migraines and recurring exhaustion followed her. Finally, Cristal died peacefully in her sleep on June 27, 2020, at 86 years old, leaving behind a net worth estimated at $9 million, much of it earned through carefully managed real estate after acting roles grew scarce. Her legacy endures in the strength she brought to Victoria Cannon, a role born from the fragile heart of a girl who learned to survive long before she learned to shine. Don Collier as Sam Butler. Don Collier was born Donald H. Maunger on October 17, 1928, in Santa Monica, California. At 39 years old, he played Sam Butler, the quiet, steady hand of the Cannon Ranch, in The High Chaparral in 1967. His calm presence on screen hid the traces of a life built on rugged work long before cameras arrived. His early years were shaped by hard physical labor and restless movement, long before he ever reached a film set. Ranch work had already stiffened his joints by the time he appeared in smaller productions like El Dorado, where directors immediately noticed how naturally he handled horses. But those natural skills came from long days that left him bruised, limping, and learning to stay silent about pain because silence kept him employable. The instability of his youth meant every paycheck mattered, adding pressure that never truly eased. The strain on his body deepened as he stepped into more demanding work. Dust-filled ranches and shipyards had already weakened his lungs, and filming the war wagon under desert heat only aggravated the damage, leaving him coughing in private while pretending strength in public. Even his later role in The Undefeated required long riding sequences that pushed old injuries to their limit. Tragically, Collier died on September 13, 2021, at 92 years old, after lung cancer slowly closed the chapter he had fought to keep turning. He left behind a net worth of about $3 million, earned through relentless work. Films, commercials, narrations, each tied to a man who survived by never stopping. Bob Hoye as Joe Butler. Bob Hoye was born Robert Francis Hoye on April 3, 1927, in New York City. At 40 years old, he played Joe Butler, the dependable, sharp-witted cowboy, in The High Chaparral in 1967. His ease with danger made the role feel effortless, and the toll of that life never truly left him. His earliest stunt years were a blur of bruises, broken falls, and risks taken simply because risk paid better than safety. Before anyone recognized his name, he was already doubling actors in films like The Defiant Ones, absorbing the impacts they never felt. Each job demanded something harsher than the last, leaving him nursing hidden sprains and untreated fractures that followed him into adulthood. Those early sacrifices bought him entry into the industry. As his career progressed, the cost rose. Work on productions such as Nevada Smith and the outlaw Josie Wales forced him through scenes that shook his bones and left migraines pounding for days. Even then, he refused to step back. His reputation grew precisely because he didn't flinch. Yet every silent injury, every fall that knocked the breath from his chest, made the path ahead a little narrower. He built success, but it came tied to a body slowly unraveling beneath him. Hoy died on February 8, 2010, at 88 years old, after cancer ended the physical resilience he had spent a lifetime pretending was limitless. His net worth of about $2 million came from decades of risk few would dare take, and from a career that lived in the shadows behind the stars he protected. Ted Markland, as Reno. Ted Markland was born on January 15, 1933, in Syracuse, New York. At 34 years old, he played Reno, the quiet, sharp-eyed cowboy with a wounded soul, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His tall, wiry frame made the character unforgettable on screen, but that same frame had once been the reason doors slammed shut in his face. His childhood was a long trail of relocations as he followed his father's military assignments, leaving him without roots or lasting friendships. Acting lessons with Richard Boone revealed a natural talent, yet his thin build led casting agents to dismiss him from major roles, including early auditions for Bat Masterson. When he finally caught attention at the Troubadour, as though his body itself was a barrier he could never change. The fragility the industry saw in his appearance was amplified by the emotional strain he carried in private. Depression began quietly, showing itself during minor roles such as his brief appearance in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where long shooting days triggered an exhaustion that felt heavier than the work itself. His mental health declined as opportunities faded, and the isolation that once defined his childhood gradually returned in adulthood. Sadly, Markland died on December 18, 2011, at 78 years old in Yucca Valley, California, from undisclosed causes after years of withdrawing from public life. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million reflected a career of steady but modest roles. Roberto Contreras as Pedro Carr. Roberto Contreras was born on December 12, 1928, in St. Louis, Missouri. At 39 years old, he played Pedro Carr, the loyal, understated ranch hand, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His presence was subtle but essential, grounding the series with authenticity. It was a role shaped by a lifetime of silent endurance. His early years were marked by constant financial strain despite having a father who worked in the film industry. Growing up under the shadow of director Jaime Contreras offered proximity to Hollywood, yet no direct path into it. When he finally entered acting, it was through stereotyped bit roles, including early uncredited parts before appearing in Alfred Hitchcock's Topaz. The typecasting that followed reinforced the insecurity he had developed during those uncertain childhood years. The pressure of constant work took a toll on his health long before illness became visible. Exhausting schedules on productions such as Cold War aggravated chronic fatigue that he had battled since youth. Even as he appeared in larger films like Scarface, his body reacted to years of strain, with recurring flu-like symptoms and shortness of breath that he often ignored. His resilience kept him working, but the quiet deterioration never truly stopped. Contreras died on July 18, 2000, at 72 years old in Los Angeles, after a short, undisclosed illness believed by many to be cancer. His estimated net worth of around $1 million reflected decades of constant work rather than financial comfort. His passing came just 4 years before the death of his son Luis, deepening the tragedy that had quietly shaped his life. Jerry Summers as Ira Bean. Jerry Summers was born on February 3, 1931, in the Bronx, New York. At 36 years old, he played Ira Bean, the young, eager ranch hand, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His athletic build made him one of the most reliable stunt performers on the lot. But every confident movement on screen grew from a childhood defined by risk. Growing up restless and physically fearless, he embraced danger early, turning to athletics as both an escape and a discipline. Stunt training came naturally, but it was blazing saddles and countless uncredited early films that taught him how often pain hid behind applause. Multiple high falls left him breathless and bruised for weeks, and doubling actors like Kirk Douglas pushed his body through impacts no protective gear could soften. Those years built his reputation while quietly dismantling his joints, his spine, and his confidence in ever slowing down. The strain followed him well into adulthood. Old injuries resurfaced without warning, pain spreading through his legs, numbness in his hands, moments of dizziness he dismissed to stay employed. Even brief acting roles in early television felt physically demanding because of the silent damage accumulating over decades. The lifestyle bled into his personal life, breaking marriages and leaving emotional fatigue. Sadly, Summers died on January 1, 2006, at 75 years old in Arroyo Grande, California, from undisclosed causes after a lifetime of injuries many believed had never fully healed. His estimated net worth of $1 million came from constant punishing work rather than stability. Gilbert Roland as Don Domingo Montoya. Gilbert Roland was born on December 11, 1905, in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. At 65 years old, he played Don Domingo Montoya, the elegant, aging aristocrat, in the High Chaparral in 1970. His voice carried the charm of a man who had survived both glamour and ruin. His late arrival to the series reflected a lifetime of reinvention. His youth was shaped by political violence that forced his family to flee Mexico, leaving him wandering the American Southwest in search of stability. Hollywood became a refuge, though one built on hardship. He slept in churches, worked odd jobs, and lost employment repeatedly for sneaking onto film sets. Early roles in The Plastic Age and Camille brought attention but also typecasting, fixing him as the Latin lover long before he had the power to resist the label. Those early years carved both ambition and weariness into his character. Behind the polished exterior, age brought ailments he tried to mask: fatigue, chest tightness, and the slow decline that years of performing had accelerated. Even during praised appearances in The Bad and the Beautiful, he felt an increasing fragility that contrasted sharply with the romantic image studios demanded. Life in Hollywood magnified loneliness, especially after the collapse of his scandal-ridden marriage to Constance Bennett. Tragically, Roland died on May 15, 1994, at 88 years old from cancer, ending a career that had spanned more than 70 years. His estimated net worth of $3 million reflected a lifetime of reinvention and persistence, rather than ease. His ashes were scattered at sea, a fitting farewell for a man who spent his life drifting between countries, identities, and roles. Henry Wills as Tommy. Henry Wills was born on December 10, 1921, in Florence, Arizona. At 46 years old, he played Tommy, the quiet, dependable ranch hand whose presence held the background together, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His riding skill on screen came from a lifetime spent on real cattle land. Few viewers ever knew the danger beneath every move he performed. He grew up on an isolated ranch where physical labor began before sunrise, shaping a body that could withstand impacts most actors feared. That harsh upbringing also meant he learned horsemanship the hard way. Early stunt appearances in films like The Cowboys showed how quickly injuries could end a career, yet he returned to work because stuntmen rarely had the luxury of stopping. The fear of losing mobility stayed with him, echoing every time he climbed back into a saddle. The pain carried into middle age. Old fractures stiffened during cold mornings, and nerve damage in his leg worsened year by year, though he hid it to keep his place in productions. Even coordinating stunts on major westerns left him exhausted. Fighting dizziness and chest tightness, he dismissed as stress. His marriage remained steady but not untouched. Long shoots, constant danger, and the quiet dread of the next accident strained conversations at home. Work on high-profile projects only heightened the pressure, especially when stars like John Wayne trusted him to make impossible scenes look effortless. Sadly, Wills died of a heart attack on September 15, 1994, at 73 years old in Los Angeles. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million came from decades of hazardous work that rarely honored the body behind the action. Remembered by stuntmen as a legend who performed more than 1,400 horse falls, he left behind a legacy built on courage. Mark Slade as Billy Blue Cannon. Mark Slade was born on May 1, 1939 in Salem, Massachusetts. At 28 years old, he played Billy Blue Cannon, the restless, idealistic son of Big John, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His youthful charm made him one of the most recognizable faces of the series. Few knew that his path to stardom began in a far quieter world. He grew up drawn to sketchbooks more than cameras, imagining a future as a cartoonist long before audiences learned his name. The turmoil after his parents' divorce pushed him deeper into art, a private refuge he rarely spoke about. His move to New York brought small roles, including The Raiders, 1963, which exposed him to the pressure of being young, talented, and replaceable. Those early years trained him to mask insecurity with ambition. The strain intensified when writing on the High Chaparral declined, leaving him trapped between loyalty and creative frustration. He carried unresolved tension from his youth into tense meetings, struggling to defend himself without alienating producers. Stress left its own marks, fatigue that lingered, headaches that arrived during long shoots, and the silent fear of losing the future he had worked so hard to build. Sadly, Slade is 86 years old in 2025 and living a peaceful life in Northern California, returning to the art career he once abandoned. His estimated $2 million net worth reflects decades of steady work rather than Hollywood excess. Today, he paints, writes, and creates exactly the life his younger self once dreamed of. Quiet, intentional, and finally free from the drama that shadowed his early career. Michael Keep as Keopana. Michael Keep was born on December 15, 1922, in Pueblo, Colorado. At 45 years old, he played Keopana, the stoic Apache scout whose silence carried deep loyalty, in the High Chaparral in 1967. His grounded presence made the character feel authentic in a genre that often wasn't. Audiences never knew how much of that weight came from Keep's own beginnings. He grew up in a working-class community where opportunities were scarce, and acting felt impossibly distant. Using the name Michael Keopana, he took whatever small jobs he could find, pushing through long hours to escape financial instability. His early work in films like Mirage, 1959, taught him how fragile a career could be. Roles were brief, paychecks uncertain. That pressure shadowed his youth, shaping a quiet determination that actors around him would later admire. Those same years left him exhausted by the time westerns peaked. The physical demands of rugged roles brought recurring chest tightness and fatigue. Even in 40 Guns to Apache Pass, 1967, the stress of performing through discomfort became a private battle. He learned to live with those aches, accepting them as the cost of holding on to a career that had taken so long to build. Michael Keep died on November 27, 2007, at 84 years old in Los Angeles. The cause undisclosed, but believed to be related to long-term health strain. His estimated net worth of $1 million reflected decades of steady character work rather than fame. David S. Cass, Sr. As Sergeant David S. Cass, Sr. was born on March 21, 1942, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At 25 years old, he appeared as the sergeant, a disciplined, sharp-eyed military figure in the High Chaparral in 1967. His brief on-screen presence came long before audiences learned how much of Hollywood's action world depended on him. His journey began in far humbler places. He grew up in a family where work came first and dreams waited their turn, shaping a resilience he carried into adulthood. Starting as an extra, he struggled through years of inconsistent pay and physically demanding stunt jobs. His early projects, including McClintock, 1963, forced him to prove himself through bruises and near misses. Those formative years forged a man who learned to hide fear behind professionalism, even when danger became routine. The pressure mounted as he transitioned into stunt coordinating. Long days on set, repeated injuries, and constant stress took a toll he rarely acknowledged. He pushed through chest pain, lingering fatigue, and a quiet awareness that the career he loved was slowly wearing down his body. Cass died on August 28, 2020, at 78 years old in Woodland Hills, California, from complications of cancer. His estimated net worth of $2 million came from decades of directing, producing, and performing the stunts that defined action television. These were the lives behind the legends, stories of courage, loss, and quiet endings. Which actor's journey surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories.